It's a betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife, to be forsaken by your own child.
My true story from Colorado. I sold your house, Mom. You'll have to move out by tomorrow. That's what my son, Jeremy, said to me while I was folding his children's laundry in the living room I built with my own hands. No hello, no apology, no kindness in his voice. Just those 9 words, cold and efficient, as if I were some tenant overstaying her lease. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. He looked straight at me. I'm serious. Pack your stuff. Megan and I closed the deal last night. You'll be better off in a smaller place anyway. Better off. That's what he called throwing me out of the only home I've known for 46 years. The home his father and I poured our souls into. The same home where I gave birth to him, raised him, nursed him when he was sick. He was throwing me out like a worn coat just because his new wife, Megan, wanted less clutter in their lives. That's how I became clutter. I'm 73 years old. My name is Rose Miller. I'm a retired school librarian, a widow of 19 years, and the mother of 2, Jeremy and his older sister, Clara, who passed away in a car crash when she was only 21. Jeremy was all I had left. After Clara died, something in me broke, but Jeremy was my anchor. I remember clutching his tiny hand at her funeral, and he whispered, "Don't cry, Mama. I'll take care of you." He was 7. I never imagined the boy who made that promise would become the man who'd break it so carelessly. After my husband, Peter, died of a heart attack, I stayed in our little home in Boulder. I didn't need much. I grew herbs in the backyard, read mystery novels in the sunroom, and watched the birds visit the feeder every morning. When Jeremy got married, I gave him everything. I paid for their down payment, gifted them our second car, and even converted my garage into a playroom for their children when they moved in with me 5 years ago, temporarily. But temporary turned permanent, and permanent became suffocating for them. At least, that's what Megan told me last week when she pulled me aside in the kitchen. "This house is too sentimental," she said, crinkling her nose. "It's like a time capsule for someone else's life." She meant mine. I stayed quiet. It's something I've gotten used to, staying quiet. The noise of their modern lives swallowed me whole. Their new smart home devices didn't recognize my voice. Megan's friends called me the live-in grandmother, as if I were part of the furniture. Jeremy, once my sweet boy, became a stranger who avoided eye contact. And then he sold my house. Behind my back. Without even telling me they'd been speaking to a realtor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the fireplace, the one Peter had built brick by brick, and stared into the dying embers. My chest felt hollow, not from grief, but from something worse, betrayal that simmers instead of screams. The next morning the movers came. Jeremy had them box up my belongings before I could even finish breakfast. Megan handed me a folder. Inside was the address of a cozy independent living facility, the kind with faded wallpaper and stale air. "It's nice," she said. "You'll meet people your age." People my age. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her that I taught high schoolers how to read Shakespeare, that I once volunteered in disaster zones, that I held my daughter's broken body and still found the strength to mother Jeremy. But I didn't scream.
I didn't cry.
I smiled. And that was the moment my revenge began. Because silence is not surrender. Sometimes, silence is strategy. What Jeremy didn't know is that after Peter passed, I never added his name to the deed. The house was still legally mine.
Completely.
Entirely.
Mine.
But the day after he threw me out, I walked to the Boulder County Recorder's office. The sale had gone through, that part was true. But Megan, who fancied herself clever, had forged my signature.
Sloppily.
They'd used a notary who never met me, just stamped the form, probably while sipping her morning coffee. I said nothing that day. I smiled at the clerk, folded up the copy of the deed, and walked out with my back straight. Because this wasn't over. And in time, I would show them the true meaning of "you'll have to move out." If you've ever had someone you raised look you in the eyes and treat you like an obstacle, you'll understand why my silence wasn't weakness. It was gathering strength, and it was just beginning. I didn't go to the senior facility. Instead, I checked into the same quiet motel Jeremy used to beg me to take him to when he was a child, the one with the indoor pool and the old gumball machine by the lobby. It was still there, dusty and chipped, but I smiled when I saw it. Because memory is a kind of armor. That evening, I sat on the floral bedspread and called my old friend Shirley, who worked part-time for a real estate attorney in Denver. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but as soon as she heard my voice, she said, "Rose? Honey, what's wrong?" And I told her everything. The forged deed, the sudden eviction, the movers, Megan, the ache in my chest. She didn't gasp or cry. Shirley just got quiet in that way women do when they're already calculating next steps. "Meet me at the office tomorrow," she said. "I'll call in a favor." By noon the next day, we had pulled the notary's license history. Turns out she'd been investigated before, once, for verifying documents for a man in hospice care who couldn't even sign his own name. This time, her sloppiness would cost her. And Megan? She'd signed as my witness. With a flourish. Her maiden name was still legible under the signature line, and that was her biggest mistake. Shirley's boss, a calm, silver-haired man named Daniel, leaned back in his chair after reviewing the paperwork and said, "This could be criminal." I nodded.
Good.
But I wasn't ready to file yet. I needed more than punishment. I needed something they'd never forget. So I returned to the house. Just once. I arrived in the evening, just as the sun was sinking behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky with orange and fire. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, looking at the porch where Peter used to sit with his guitar, the window where Clara used to wave goodbye, and the crooked stepping stone Jeremy made in second grade that still sat, cracked, by the front path. My name was gone from the mailbox. It now read, The Graysons. Jeremy had taken Megan's last name when they married, said it sounded cleaner for branding when they started their consulting business. I knocked once, then twice. Jeremy opened the door, half-dressed in gym shorts, phone in hand. His eyes widened. "Mom? What are you? How did you even get this address?" "This is my address," I said. He looked over his shoulder nervously, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You're not supposed to be here. Megan doesn't want." "I don't care what Megan wants." That stopped him. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope Daniel had prepared. "Read this carefully. You and your wife committed fraud. The house was never yours to sell. The deed was forged. Your notary lied. If I want, I can have you both arrested. But I'm not going to do that. Yet." His face went pale. "I just want you to know," I said, calmly, "that everything you built on lies will come down." Jeremy reached for the envelope, but I held on to it. "You will not warn Megan. You will not move money. You will not make calls. Because if you do, the next knock at your door won't be mine. It'll be the sheriff's." He swallowed. "So, what do you want?" "Silence," I said. "I want you to live in the fear you gave me. Every day you wake up in my house, I want you to wonder if today's the day I take it back. If today's the day your children ask you why Grandma left crying. If today's the day the truth gets louder than your lies." I handed him the envelope. "Read it. And wait." And I walked away. That week, I went to work quietly. I transferred the property title into a trust under Clara's name. I contacted a small local foundation that supports women rebuilding their lives after abuse and offered them the use of my backyard garden for trauma healing programs. I started donating anonymously to single mothers in our community, all in Clara's name. Megan and Jeremy never knew, but word spreads in Boulder. Especially when someone as high-profile as Megan starts being whispered about at PDA meetings and wine tastings. Did you hear? They might be sued for real estate fraud. No way. That house was her mother-in-law's? I thought she was dead. And Jeremy? He began unraveling. I heard it through Shirley's cousin, who happened to work with one of Megan's old business partners. Their startup began losing clients. Megan tried to pivot to coaching but couldn't scrub the gossip off her image. Jeremy stopped attending networking events. Their smiles on Instagram dimmed. Still, I said nothing. Weeks passed. Then one morning, I received a small letter in the motel mailbox. No return address. Just a single sentence inside. I'm sorry, Jeremy. I stared at it for a long time, but I didn't reply, because silence, now, was louder than any answer I could give. That week, I made a decision. It was time to end it. I met again with Daniel and instructed him to proceed, but with a twist. I didn't want Jeremy and Megan arrested. I didn't want news crews. I didn't want shouting matches in courtrooms. I wanted my house back, and I wanted them to leave the same way I had, overnight, without warning, with cardboard boxes and the smell of regret. Daniel filed a quiet title lawsuit. With all the forged documents and false notary testimony, it was swift. A judge ruled in my favor within 3 weeks. Jeremy and Megan had 48 hours to vacate. I didn't call them. I didn't even show up. But I did ask one thing, that the movers wait until exactly 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning to begin hauling their things out, just as the neighborhood kids were playing outside and their friends were sipping coffee on their porches. Jeremy tried to fight it, but he couldn't fight the law this time.
He called me. Once.
I let it ring, because my revenge was done. But the consequences? They were just beginning. The morning Jeremy and Megan were forced to move out of my house, the sky was unusually clear, the kind of Colorado blue that makes everything sharper, more exposed. They didn't expect the moving truck to pull into the driveway right after sunrise, nor the 2 uniformed officers who stood quietly on the lawn with printed orders from the court, nor the curious stares from their neighbors across the street, phones half-raised, coffee forgotten. I watched from a parked car down the block. Jeremy came out first. Shirtless, hair disheveled, eyes sunken. He looked nothing like the proud man who once stood in that same doorway and told me to leave. Megan followed, wrapped in a pink robe and fury. She yelled at the officers, threatened to sue, demanded a delay. There was none. The movers began boxing up their belongings while their 2 kids, my grandchildren, sat confused on the front steps. I saw the youngest boy tug on Jeremy's sleeve and ask, "Are we going to Grandma's house now?" Jeremy just stared at him. That moment shattered something in him. I could feel it, even from across the street. I didn't smile. Revenge, when done right, doesn't feel like a victory parade. It feels like silence returning to its rightful place. They left in 2 SUVs by noon, the back seats piled with bags and toys, Megan still shouting into her phone as they pulled away. The house was mine again. But I didn't go back right away. I stayed in that motel for another week. Because I needed to remember who I was without all of them. I cooked my own breakfast in a tiny kitchenette. I visited the public library and lost myself in old romance novels. I even called a former student of mine, now a professor at the University of Colorado, and let him convince me to speak at a panel on lifelong literacy. It was the first time in years I felt like more than just someone's mother. Or someone's burden. When I finally stepped back into my home, it was empty, and not just physically. The pictures were gone. The smell of Megan's lavender cleaner had faded. But so had the years of being overlooked, tiptoed around, dismissed like a ghost in my own kitchen. I walked from room to room slowly. In the master bedroom, I found a single sock. In the playroom, a broken crayon. In the backyard, the rosemary bush Clara planted had bloomed purple again. I sat on the patio and cried for exactly 7 minutes. No more. I counted. And then I stood up, stretched my back, and began reclaiming what was mine. The first thing I did was paint the kitchen cabinets. Jeremy always said the color I chose wasn't modern. I made it even less modern. A deep sunflower yellow that made me feel like I was in Tuscany. I took down the digital gadgets and put up family photos, real ones. Peter with his messy hair. Clara with her braces. Even baby Jeremy, back when his eyes still looked at me like I was his whole world. Next, I called in a few favors. Clara's best friend, Elise, was now running a domestic violence shelter outside of town. I offered to let her use the sunroom twice a week for small support circles. The space filled with women's voices and shared strength. Then I converted the garage again, not into a playroom this time, but into a tiny free library. The neighborhood kids started coming by after school, trading dog-eared books for new ones. I kept a box of apples and granola bars on the porch bench. Some of them called me Miss Rose. A few called me Grandma. And slowly, my home began breathing again. It was no longer a cage of memories.
It was a sanctuary.
But Jeremy wasn't done. A month after they moved out, he emailed me. No subject line. Just one sentence. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." I didn't respond. The next week, a letter arrived in the mailbox. Megan's handwriting. It read, "You ruined our lives. You're selfish. You could have just let us keep the house. We have kids, Rose." What kind of mother does that to her own son? There was no apology, no remorse, just blame, dripping from every word. I burned the letter in the fire pit Peter built, but not before copying it, because I knew something they didn't. While I had taken back my house quietly, the legal system had left breadcrumbs. The court filings, the title reversal, the notarization investigation, it was all public record. And Megan? She was still trying to build a brand online, selling courses to young couples about ethical entrepreneurship and family-first living. So I sent that copied letter, along with court documents and a polite summary, to 3 former clients listed on her website. I didn't sign my name. I didn't have to. Within 2 weeks, her business page disappeared, and I received a knock on my door one afternoon. Jeremy stood there alone. No suit, no phone, no smug smile. Just a man who'd been stripped of the lies he wore like armor. He looked thinner, older. "I wanted to talk," he said. I held the door. I wanted to say sorry. I let him speak. He fumbled his words. Said it wasn't all Megan's fault. Said he felt trapped, pressured to provide, scared to say no to her. Said he remembered that day at Clara's funeral and how he promised he'd take care of me. He even cried. But I didn't hug him. I didn't cry back. I just said, "You let your wife turn me into a ghost. And you followed." He nodded. "I know." We sat on the porch, not as mother and son, but as strangers trying to remember how to be something else. He told me they were renting a small apartment now, that the kids missed me, that Megan was struggling. That word again, struggling. I thought about the nights I struggled to sleep in that motel, alone and discarded. But I didn't say it. Instead, I said, "You're welcome to bring them by next Sunday. Just the boys. No cameras. No Instagram posts." He agreed. And he came, with both boys holding small bouquets of wildflowers they picked along the trail. They hugged me like nothing had changed. And for a few hours, I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, something good could still grow in the cracks betrayal left behind. When they left, Jeremy lingered. "Why didn't you press charges?" he asked. I looked at him. "Because I wanted you to live with the weight, not just the punishment." He lowered his eyes. "I do." And I believed him. But I also knew this. The wound he opened in me won't ever fully close. It'll just scar over. And serve as a reminder that silence, true silence, isn't the absence of words. It's the space where power returns to the person it was stolen from. The Sunday visits became a quiet ritual. Every other week, Jeremy dropped the boys off. They'd race up the path with muddy sneakers and sticky fingers, their pockets full of rocks, questions, and wild stories. I kept snacks ready, not the kind Megan approved of, but the kind childhood is made of: peanut butter cookies, grape soda, cinnamon popcorn. The boys never asked about the past. And I never offered. Because forgiveness, in my world, isn't something you announce. It's something you show.
Slowly. Carefully.
Like tending to a wounded plant and waiting to see if it will bloom again. Jeremy always lingered in the car. Sometimes he waved. Other times he just watched. But he never came inside again. And I never invited him. One morning, as I was pruning the lilac bush Clara planted the summer before her accident, I noticed an envelope tucked into the gate. No stamp, no name. Inside was a printed letter, typed carefully, like someone didn't trust their own handwriting anymore. "Dear Rose, I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but I miss you, not just the boys. I miss the way you used to hum when you cooked. I miss the crossword puzzles we used to do together. I miss knowing I wasn't a stranger in your eyes. I've started therapy, real therapy. I want to understand why I did what I did. Why I let someone else convince me you were in the way. Please know that I love you. I just didn't know how to show it without thinking of myself first. Jeremy. I sat down on the porch swing and stared at it for a long time. Part of me softened. Another part tensed. Because people don't just erase betrayal with apologies. You don't get to burn the bridge and then ask for a ride back across. Still, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the old cigar box where I keep things too painful to throw away and too important to forget. That week, a stranger came to my door. She was in her early 30s, dressed in neat, pressed clothes, holding a clipboard and a hopeful smile. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked. "My name is Tasha. I'm with the Boulder Council on Aging. We're starting a pilot program, pairing retired educators with at-risk youth for mentorship. We've heard wonderful things about you." I blinked. "Me?" "Yes," she said brightly. "Your free library, the shelter collaboration, the garden classes. You've become something of a quiet legend around here." Quiet legend. The words hit something deep. I agreed to meet with the director. By the next month, I was mentoring 2 teenage girls, one who had just lost her mother and another whose family barely noticed her. We met every Wednesday in the sunroom. We read books together. We talked about fear, about disappointment, about survival. One of the girls asked me, "Do you have kids?" I said, "I had 2. That was all." Because this chapter of my life was not about looking back. It was about rebuilding. In the fall, I was invited to speak at the same high school I taught at decades ago. I walked the same halls I once owned with confidence. Students passed me without recognizing me, which felt strange and freeing at the same time. When I entered the library, I nearly burst into tears. The librarian had framed a photo of me, younger, bright-eyed, holding up a library card like a trophy. Below it was a plaque. Rose Miller Literacy Center, in honor of 32 years of quiet service. I didn't even know they'd done it. That night, I lit a single candle for Clara. She would have smiled at all this. She used to say I was the strongest woman she knew, even when I didn't believe it. That winter, Jeremy came to the house. Uninvited. It was snowing hard. I was watching the flakes fall from the kitchen window, sipping tea, when I heard the knock. He stood there, covered in frost, holding a small box. "I know you said no gifts," he said, "but this isn't really a gift. It's something of yours." I didn't answer, just opened the door wider. Inside the box was the music box Peter gave me on our 30th anniversary. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought it had been lost in the move. "I found it in one of our boxes," he said quietly. "Megan wanted to keep it." I said no. I looked at him for a long time. "What happened to you, Jeremy?" I asked. He sat at the table, eyes tired. "I think I wanted so badly to be someone important. I stopped being someone good." There was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. "She's gone," he said after a while. "Megan." He nodded. "Moved back east. Said this town was too small. Said I was too broken. And the boys. With me. I filed for full custody. I'm trying." For the first time in years, I believed him.
We didn't talk much more that night.
He left after an hour, but not before hugging me, the kind of hug that wasn't tight or desperate, but tentative. A truce, not a victory. When he left, I wound the music box. It still played the same tune, but somehow, it sounded different.
Softer.
That spring, the garden bloomed brighter than I remembered. Lavender, thyme, tulips, and tomatoes. The neighborhood kids brought me old pots to paint. One of the mentorship girls, Lila, came by weekly to read poetry under the oak tree. And Jeremy? He came by often. Never to ask. Just to listen. Sometimes to help fix a hinge or mow the lawn. He asked if I needed anything. I told him I needed quiet. And he gave it to me. One afternoon, while we were planting marigolds, he asked, "Do you ever think we'll be okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I handed him a trowel and said, "Start with the soil. Everything else takes time." Because some roots regrow, but others, once cut, never reach the same depth again. It was a Thursday morning when the past finally caught up to Jeremy. I was in the middle of slicing apples for a school fundraiser when my neighbor, Trudy, tapped on the kitchen window with her phone in hand. "Rose," she said, "you'd better see this." She handed me the screen. There, on a local community Facebook page, was a post with Jeremy's photo and Megan's, taken back when they were still playing house in my home. The caption above the photo was what made my stomach tighten. "Remember this couple? House theft, fake notary, and elderly eviction. The case may be cold, but the trail isn't." It had begun circulating again. The post didn't come from anyone I knew, but the comments were vicious, and they multiplied by the minute. "This is why you don't trust influencers. Imagine doing this to your own mom." I know someone who used to work with her, said they were both snakes. By noon, it had spread to the town subreddit, then to Twitter. An old business client of Megan's reposted the story with screenshots of the forged signature and called for them to be publicly held accountable. Jeremy hadn't even known yet, but I did, and I knew exactly what this would do to him. By evening, my landline rang. The only people who called it were old friends and telemarketers. But this time, it was Jeremy. His voice was hollow. "Mom, it's happening again." I sat down. "They're calling my job. People are tagging the kids' school. It's like everything I tried to bury is clawing its way back up." I said nothing. He breathed heavily. "Should I post something? A statement? Should I explain?" "No," I said. Silence again. "Then, you're not going to defend me, are you?" I closed my eyes. "Jeremy, I already did. I defended you your entire life. I covered your mistakes. I explained away your rudeness. I made excuses for your silence." He didn't speak. "You had your chance to change the story," I added softly. "But you chose to sell it instead." He started crying. Real crying. The kind where you hear the breath collapse in someone's chest. "I'm trying to be better now," he whispered. "I really am." "I know," I said. "But the world doesn't move at the speed of your guilt. It moves at the speed of memory. And memory doesn't forget just because you're sorry." He came over the next day. No excuses. No questions. Just help me organize food for the fundraiser like he always used to as a teen. He cut apples, washed tables, even tied ribbons on the cookie jars Lila had decorated. When the last family left and the sun dipped low, we sat on the steps and looked out over the street. The neighborhood was quiet. "I lost my job," he finally said. I turned to him. "I figured it would come," he said. "They didn't say it was because of the post, but I know it was." He didn't ask for help. And I didn't offer. Because I wasn't going to rescue him anymore. He had to rescue himself. But I did tell him one thing. "This won't break you unless you let it. But you need to stop running from who you were. And start showing who you are now." That weekend, he volunteered to speak at a local restorative justice circle, the same one I'd referred women to through the shelter. He didn't hide the truth. He read the full court filing out loud. He explained the forgery, the eviction, my motel stay, his own downfall. When he finished, there was no applause. Just a long, hard silence. And then someone asked, "What changed?" He turned and pointed to me, seated at the back. That woman never screamed, never posted, never sued me into poverty. She let me feel the full weight of what I did, without telling the world to hate me. That changed everything.
He came home quietly that night.
And we planted daffodils. The internet never really forgets. But the world does move on. The buzz faded. New drama took over the town's gossip chain. Megan, last I heard, was trying to rebrand under a new name in a new city. She never wrote again.
And Jeremy?
He started baking. Of all things, baking. Banana bread, blueberry scones, sourdough loaves. He filled my kitchen with flour and mistakes and laughter that didn't feel forced. Asked him why. "Because when I bake," he said, "I can't fake it. You can't cheat a rise or lie to the yeast." That made me smile. He even started selling a few things at the farmer's market. And when one of the neighbors, a stern older man named Bill, bought a loaf and told Jeremy it was as good as your mother's, I watched something soften in my son's shoulders. Redemption doesn't come in big moments. It comes in small, quiet ones. On a Tuesday, in a pie crust, in the way a man wipes the flour off his hands before shaking someone else's. Spring melted into summer, and one evening Jeremy asked if he could bring the boys by for a sleepover. No screens, he promised. Just storybooks and lemonade. I agreed. The house came alive with laughter, spilled popcorn, blanket forts, and whispered secrets. One of the boys asked if he could sleep in the attic because it's spooky, and I let him, with a flashlight and a bowl of jelly beans. That night, Jeremy and I sat on the porch again, like we did when he was 17 and scared of his first breakup. Do you ever wish things were different? He asked. I thought about it for a long time. I wish you hadn't hurt me, I said. But I don't wish away the woman I became because of it.
He looked at me.
I think that's the bravest thing you've ever said. I took a breath. No, I replied. The bravest thing I ever did was staying quiet when every part of me wanted to scream. Because silence isn't weakness. It's choosing not to burn the house down when you could. It's trusting time to do what rage never can. And sometimes, silence is how a woman tells the world, I saw everything. And I'm still standing. The letter arrived in early September, typed, crisp, official. It came from the Colorado State Elder Advocacy Board. They were hosting a panel on elder fraud and financial abuse, and someone had submitted my name. The envelope included an invitation to speak as the keynote guest.
Me.
I sat at the kitchen table staring at it, the morning light falling across the paper like a spotlight I wasn't sure I wanted to stand in. I didn't ask who submitted my name. I had my suspicions. Elise, maybe. Or Shirley. Someone who thought my silence should finally find a microphone. The letter used words like inspirational and trailblazing and model of resilience. It also said, we would be honored if you shared your personal story, especially how you reclaimed your home and your voice. That last part hit me, because reclaiming my home had been one thing. Reclaiming my voice, that was still a work in progress. I didn't mention the letter to Jeremy. Not that week. We were in a rhythm, finally. He was baking, mentoring a teen boy through the same justice program, even offering to teach a Saturday workshop on starting small businesses honestly. His name was beginning to mean something new in the community, not because people forgot, but because they'd seen him own it. So I kept quiet, until the day I found him scrubbing the floors in my kitchen, sweat on his brow, determination in his hands. I leaned on the doorway. I need to tell you something. He looked up. I handed him the letter. He read it in silence. Then, are you going to do it? I don't know. He nodded. If I were you, I'd want to burn me down in front of that room. I raised an eyebrow. That's not my way. You know that. But it'd be fair, he said. You earned it. I folded my arms. What about the boys? Their classmates' parents will hear it. Your coworkers. Jeremy straightened up and wiped his hands on a towel. I've spent years pretending my worst moment never happened. But if you speak and someone in that room feels seen, really seen, then maybe it wasn't all wasted. I studied him carefully. Gone was the boy who ran from blame. Gone was the man who forged signatures and smiled at the mess he made. What stood in front of me now was something I'd almost stopped believing I'd ever see again. My son. The next morning, I called the number at the bottom of the letter. I said yes. The event was held in Denver, at a modest but dignified conference center. The room was filled with folding chairs, coffee urns, notepads, and people with too many stories written in the creases of their faces. I wore Clara's favorite brooch. When I was introduced, there was polite applause. I walked to the podium slowly, steady. The microphone felt cold in my hand. I didn't bring notes. Good afternoon, I said. My name is Rose Miller. I'm 73 years old. And I was almost erased from my own home by the very people I thought I could trust most. A hush fell over the room. I told them the facts. No dramatics. No embellishments. Just the truth. How Jeremy and Megan had sold my house behind my back. How I found myself in a motel room. How I built my revenge not with fire, but with paper, patience, and the law. And then I told them something else. I didn't want to destroy my son. I wanted him to feel what I felt, powerlessly watching something he loved get taken away. But I wanted him to survive that feeling. Because that's what I did. I survived. And I rebuilt. I paused. There are people who think silence is weakness. That not shouting makes you passive. That not posting everything online means you're invisible. But I'm here to tell you, silence can also be power. When it's chosen, not forced. When it holds space for truth, not shame. The room stood still. Then someone in the back, a woman with silver hair and a cane, began clapping. Others followed. Some wiped their eyes. After the speech, a man from a national legal defense nonprofit approached me. "We'd love to use parts of your story in our training materials," he said. "Your case, your strength, it's unforgettable." I nodded, but I asked that no names be used. No photos. No family ties. Because I had no interest in becoming famous. I only wanted to remind people that quiet doesn't mean powerless. On the drive home, Jeremy was waiting on the porch. "How did it go?" he asked. I didn't speak. I just walked up to him and handed him the program booklet. He opened it, read the keynote summary, and saw the line I'd written in place of a bio. She reclaimed her house, her peace, and her purpose, and never once raised her voice. He looked up at me, teary-eyed. "I meant every word," I said. "I know," he replied. That night, I opened the windows and let the breeze in. The house smelled like warm bread and lavender. Somewhere down the hall, the boys were laughing in their sleep. I sat in the old rocking chair Peter built and whispered into the quiet. "I'm still here. Because sometimes, surviving is the loudest thing you'll ever do." 2 weeks after the panel, I received a call from a woman named Lexi James. She introduced herself as a journalist with Modern Grace, a national lifestyle magazine that had recently started a series on everyday resilience. "We heard about your speech," she said. "We were hoping to feature you. Your story, it's powerful, Ms. Miller." I almost said no immediately, but instead, I asked her what exactly the story would focus on. "Well," she said, "you're a grandmother who overcame betrayal without violence or bitterness. You held your family accountable. That's rare. And inspiring. And do you intend to name my son?" I asked. There was a pause. We'd prefer to include his role. We don't use full names, of course, but... "No," I said. Another pause. "You're not angry anymore, are you?" "I am," I said. "But my anger doesn't belong in print. It belongs in memory, where it can't do any more harm." She thanked me politely and hung up. That evening, Jeremy was sitting with the boys at the table, helping them with a puzzle when I mentioned the call. He looked up, wary. "What did you say?" I turned it down. His face relaxed. "Thank you. I didn't do it for you," I added. He nodded. Still. Later that night, I sat in the garden with my tea and thought about how different things had become. Not because I was now healed or whole.
No.
Healing isn't a final destination. It's a road with many forks. Sometimes, I still hear Megan's voice in the kitchen. Sometimes, I wake up wondering where the keys are, forgetting this is my home again.
But there are new memories now.
On Saturday mornings, the boys run through the backyard barefoot. Jeremy makes pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs. The sunroom smells like citrus and old pages. And the library is fuller than ever. The free library box has become a town favorite. A little girl named Sophia comes by every Tuesday with her dad, always bringing a book and taking a new one. She once told me, "Miss Rose, your house feels like a storybook." That one sentence has stayed with me, because that's what I've made this place into. Not just a home, but a story. One that almost ended, then took a sharp, quiet turn toward a different kind of justice. But peace doesn't come without tests. One test arrived in the form of a letter. Again, no stamp. This time it was from Megan.
Typed. Cold.
But unmistakably her. It read, "I know I made mistakes. I know you probably hate me, but Jeremy won't let me speak to the boys. I don't want to fight him in court. I don't want to make things worse. I just want to ask, would you let them decide? If they want to see me, could you at least tell them I miss them? I sat at the kitchen table reading it over and over. Not once did she apologize for the house. Not for the forged signature. Not for calling me sentimental clutter. Still, I couldn't ignore the possibility that she was telling the truth, that she missed them. But I also couldn't forget the day I was thrown out of my own home while she sipped her coffee and smiled as the movers boxed up my life.
So I didn't reply.
I didn't tell the boys. Because protecting them was more important than letting Megan feel better. I didn't hate her. I just didn't owe her anything anymore. The next weekend, Jeremy found the letter in the mailbox. She's reaching out to you now, he asked. She doesn't dare reach out to you. She's trying. I blocked her. I handed the letter to him. You decide. But if you want my opinion, I don't think she wants them back. I think she wants her old image back. He sighed. Yeah. We didn't speak of it again. But that night, Jeremy asked if he could stay in the guest room. Just for a while. Until I can get things back on track, he said. I didn't say yes right away. Because boundaries matter. But I saw something in his eyes. Not desperation. Not guilt. Just the soft light of someone who didn't want to be alone anymore. 2 weeks, I said. And you're baking breakfast. He smiled.
Deal.
The next morning, I woke up to the smell of cinnamon rolls. Real ones, not from a can. As I came into the kitchen, Jeremy turned to me with flour on his cheek and said, I used your old recipe. And for the first time in years, the house felt like it had rewound itself, not to erase the pain, but to layer something sweeter on top. Later that afternoon, the boys came running in from the backyard, shouting about a squirrel that stole their sandwich. The sunlight hit the windows just right, and for a brief, fleeting second, I saw a reflection in the glass. It was me, holding Clara as a child, Peter behind me, Jeremy small and sticky-fingered beside us. A memory, yes, but also a reminder. This home was built on love, and nearly lost to betrayal. But I got it back, not just the walls or the roof or the garden. I got back the silence. The quiet that wasn't empty, but full of meaning. The final morning Jeremy stayed in my guest room, I woke to find the kitchen table already set. Not just breakfast, a full spread. Pancakes shaped like stars, warm berry compote, fresh squeezed orange juice. The boys had even folded little napkins into flowers. Jeremy stood by the counter, apron dusted in flour, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me stay, for letting me try again. I nodded, but didn't answer right away. He sat down across from me. I've been thinking, maybe we should write it down. The whole story.
Not to sell it.
Not for the papers.
But just so the boys know one day.
Not the betrayal part, but the strength part. What you did. I looked out the window. The garden was in full bloom. Sunlight spilled across the rosemary. The wind chimes Peter hung decades ago whispered a soft tune. You want to teach them about strength? I said. Then let them watch how you live now. That's the only legacy that matters. He nodded slowly. After breakfast, they packed. Jeremy kissed both boys on the head, promised them movie night at his new apartment, and gave me a final hug. This one was different. No guilt in it. No apology woven through the arms. Just gratitude. That afternoon, I sat in my rocking chair with a blanket over my knees and let the silence settle again. But this time it was the good kind. Not the kind that follows betrayal, or hides pain, or swallows your voice. This silence was earned. In that quiet, I wrote a letter. Not to Megan. Not to Jeremy. To someone who would never read it, but who, somehow, I still needed to speak to. To Clara. My sweet girl. You be proud of your brother. It took him too long, but he made it back. I think you'd have found a way to forgive him faster than I did. You always had a bigger heart. The house is safe again. The garden is full. The library is overflowing. Sometimes I swear I see you in the sunroom, turning pages with that furrowed brow you used to get when a book disappointed you. I survived this, Clara. I really did. Not because I screamed, but because I didn't. Because I waited. Because I listened. Because I believed that sometimes the best revenge is letting people watch you thrive after they tried to erase you. I miss you. Every day. But I carry you with me.
Love, Mom.
I folded the letter and placed it inside the cigar box with Megan's note, Jeremy's apology, and the eviction notice that started it all. Then I closed it. Because that chapter was done. That evening, I walked to the backyard and found two of the girls from the mentorship program sitting under the oak tree, reading aloud to each other. One turned to me and said, "Miss Rose, do you ever get tired of being strong?" I smiled. All the time. But I rest. I don't quit. They laughed softly, not quite sure if it was a joke. Later that week, I received a card from a woman who had attended the Denver panel. She wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to leave the apartment my son was using for his business and reclaim it. You reminded me that age doesn't mean weakness. It just means you've learned how to wait for the right moment." I placed that card on my fridge because it reminded me what this whole thing was about. Not the house, not the betrayal, but the reminder that women like me, women they underestimate, overlook, silence, we hold entire histories in our hands. And when we choose to act, even quietly, the world notices. I never did interviews. I never shared the full story with the public. But it lives here, in the soil, in the books, in the laughter that echoes through these rooms. Sometimes people pass my house and say, "That's the place that got taken away." But they're wrong. This house was never taken. It was tested, and I took it back. Not with lawyers or shouts or public shame, but with silence sharp enough to cut through greed. So if you're out there, someone who was betrayed by the very people you gave your life to, if you've ever been told to pack your memories into a box and leave like a guest in your own story, listen to me now. Silence is not surrender. Age does not mean weakness. And revenge? Real revenge is quiet. It whispers instead of screams. It plants flowers in the cracks of what was broken. It says, "I'm still here." And if my story spoke to your heart, if you've ever lived through something like this, or still are, subscribe, because you're not alone. And sometimes, the quietest stories are the ones the world needs most.